It was nearly midnight when Claire Morrison arrived at the small countryside platform of Duskmoor Station in northern England. The fog was so thick she could barely see the edges of the tracks. The station lamps flickered in the cold wind, their glow weak and trembling. She had missed her last connection from Leeds and was desperate to get back to her village before dawn. To her relief, one train waited with its doors open, an old engine with grimy carriages that looked as though they hadn't been cleaned in years. There was no sign of a conductor or passengers on the platform. The timetable board was blank. Something in her gut told her to wait, but the emptiness of the place unsettled her more than the train itself, so she stepped inside. The carriage smelled of rust and damp fabric. The seats were lined in faded red cloth, frayed at the edges, as though thousands of people had sat here before her. But there was no one else, just silence and the slow creak of the train as it shifted on its rails. Claire chose a seat by the window. For a few long moments, nothing happened, and she wondered if she had made a mistake. Then, without a whistle or announcement, the doors slammed shut with a metallic groan, and the train lurched forward into the fog. At first, the ride felt normal. The countryside outside was lost in a sea of black mist, but she told herself it was just the night air, heavy with dew. Minutes ticked by, then half an hour. No towns, no stations, no signal lights flashing past. Only the endless rattle of the wheels on the tracks. She realized she hadn't seen a conductor, not even a voice over the speaker. Uneasy, she rose from her seat and walked down the narrow aisle. The next carriage was dimmer, its lamps glowing with a weak yellow light. She froze at the doorway. The seats were full. Dozens of passengers sat slumped, facing forward, motionless. At first, she thought she had simply missed them boarding, but then she noticed their faces. They were pale, so pale they looked carved from wax. Their lips were gray, their eyes closed, their chests still. Their clothes were wrong. Some wore long Victorian coats, others military uniforms from the World Wars, others dresses from the 1920s. Not a single one of them moved or breathed. Claire stumbled backward, but before she could retreat to her seat, she heard footsteps at the far end of the carriage. A man appeared, tall and gaunt, wearing a black uniform. His cap shadowed most of his face, and the brass buttons on his coat gleamed faintly in the dim light. He walked slowly down the aisle, his shoes echoing on the floor. One by one, he paused at each slumped passenger, resting a hand briefly on their shoulder, as though checking them off a list. His movements were mechanical, rehearsed, like a ritual. When he reached the middle of the carriage, he suddenly stopped. His head turned slightly, and though his face was hidden, Claire felt his gaze fall on her. Slowly, the man raised his chin. The shadows shifted. His eyes were hollow black pits, empty and endless. His voice was a low whisper that carried through the silent train. "You shouldn't be here." The lights flickered. The passengers stirred, not awake, but twitching, like marionettes pulled by tangled strings. Their heads jerked, their mouths hanging open, as faint wheezing sounds escaped. Claire bolted back into the previous carriage, slamming the door shut behind her. Her heart hammered. The train felt alive, the air heavier now, filled with the scent of iron and decay. She ran through the aisles, searching for an exit, but the doors wouldn't budge. The windows showed nothing but darkness, no trees, no lamps, no world outside at all. Just the endless fog pressing against the glass. She forced herself into another carriage, hoping to find a guard or anyone who could explain. Instead, she found more passengers, all dressed in the garb of different eras, all slumped in death-like silence. When she tried to wake one, her hand recoiled instantly. The man's skin was as cold as stone. His lips parted and a soft sigh escaped, though his eyes remained shut. She stumbled backward, bumping into someone. It was the conductor. He was behind her now, though she hadn't heard the door open. He leaned close, his breath colder than ice. "One stop only," he whispered, "and you're already late." The train shook violently. Lights flared, then dimmed. The passengers' heads turned in unison toward her, eyes snapping open. They were not eyes at all, just black voids, endless tunnels of nothing. Their mouths opened wider, too wide, the skin stretching until it tore, revealing rows of jagged teeth that did not belong to humans. A scream rose among them, not from their mouths, but from the air itself. 1,000 voices crying at once. Claire ran, stumbling through car after car, every door she passed slamming shut behind her. The train seemed infinite, each carriage a new nightmare. Children's toys scattered across the seats, but no children. Suitcases leaking dark liquid onto the floor. Old portraits staring from cracked frames bolted to the walls. At last, she burst into the dining carriage. The tables were set as if for a feast, but the plates were filled with rotting meat, crawling with maggots. The smell was suffocating. She gagged, covering her mouth, but then she saw something worse. The head of every passenger she had passed before now sat at the tables, their bodies gone. They stared at her, mouths twitching in half-formed words. The conductor stood at the far end, waiting. "Everyone must disembark," he said, his hollow eyes never leaving hers. The train screeched to a halt so suddenly she was thrown to the floor. The doors opened with a long hiss. Cold air swept in, carrying the scent of damp earth and decay. Beyond the threshold was not a station, but a graveyard. Endless rows of crooked tombstones stretched into the mist. The ground was littered with broken crosses and shattered headstones. She realized the names carved into them matched the names on the dusty luggage scattered throughout the train. Some were from decades ago, some were from centuries. One of them, fresh and sharp, bore her name. Claire screamed, scrambling backward, but invisible hands gripped her arms and dragged her toward the door. The passengers arose from their seats, their hollow eyes fixed on her, their mouths stretching into grotesque grins. The conductor raised his hand, and the voices of the dead rose in a deafening chorus. She fought, clawing at the door frame, but the fog swallowed her as she was pulled outside. Her last sight was the train itself, black, endless, and waiting for the next lost soul who dared to board. And when the doors closed again, the platform at Duskmoor Station stood empty, as though no train had ever come at all. The highway through Nevada looked like a taut string laid across an ocean of sand, and Liam drove it the way you stare at a horizon you never reach. Heat shimmered on the tarmac even after sunset, a wavering skin over the world. His phone had lost reception an hour back. The last thing it managed to do before dying was mislead him into missing a turn toward Ely. Now there was just road, a low amber smear of sky, and the dry cough of the engine when he pushed past 70. He told himself it was fine. He had gas, water, and the easy confidence of someone who had never truly needed either. The map in the glove box still smelled faintly of the gas station where he debought it. Ink, coffee, and fry oil. He traced a finger along a line that felt less like a road than a promise, then folded the paper and glanced ahead. The sun had dropped behind the red teeth of distant mesas. Night moved in like a tide. That's when he saw the swing set. At first it was only motion, a slight arc against the failing light, the way you catch a bird without seeing it. Then the shape sharpened. 2 swings suspended from a metal frame, ropes dark as veins, one seat drifting forward and back as though moved by a small, patient hand. The rest of the playground resolved itself around it. Slide, seesaw, a merry-go-round bleached to the color of bone, sitting 100 yards off the road in a basin of hardpan and scrub. No fence, no buildings, no town, just a scatter of sand like thrown salt, and absurdly, a wooden sign in peeling paint, Desert View Playground. Liam slowed, then pulled onto the gravel shoulder and cut the engine. Silence fell with a thud in his ears. The air tasted of dust and old dry metal, as if the desert itself were rusting. Somewhere far off, a coyote barked, the sound passing over the land with no place to stick. The swing drifted, paused, swung back. He told himself it was the wind, though there wasn't any. He climbed out. The heat that rolled off the car's hood licked his knuckles. He took a bottle of water and a flashlight he had never used and stepped over the ditch, shoes crunching through crusted mud that hadn't been wet in years. Something about the playground pulled at him. Not curiosity exactly, but an odd recognition, as if some small version of him had been here before and lost something. A coin under a slide, a joke, an afternoon. Up close, the swing set was taller than he expected, the frame pitted and flaking. He touched the chain. It was cool, almost cold. He pushed the moving swing lightly and watched it arc. It came back, slowed, then moved again on its own. The tiniest shiver, a breath drawn where there shouldn't be lungs. He turned to the merry-go-round and set his palm on it. The metal had that smooth, polished feel of 1,000 hands. When he shoved it, it spun with a soft, steady whisper. He watched until the stars caught and smeared in its spokes. A laugh rang out behind him. He spun, the flashlight beam knifing the dark. Nothing but the slide, a long chute that ended in a drift of sand. He swallowed and waited, throat tight with the feeling of a word he couldn't get out. The laugh came again, thinner this time, carried not by wind, but by the shape of the open land. It sounded like a child trying to keep quiet and failing. "Hello," he called, and immediately hated the sound of his own voice. "Hey, you okay out here?" Silence felt like a trick. Then the seesaw moved. One end lifted, the other thunked down. He swept the beam across it, steadying the light with both hands. The plank was empty. The bolts at its fulcrum were bright with fresh scrape marks. He told himself it was animals. He told himself a lot of things in that minute, and none of them stuck. The laugh came a third time, closer, and with it the rhythmic push hiss of sneakers in sand. The back of his neck prickled. He turned the beam and caught the footprints, small, half-moon, leading from the slide to the swing and back again. They were not crisp. The edges had slumped as if the sand couldn't quite remember them. But they were there. He followed them with the light until they reached the merry-go-round and vanished. The stars brightened. The sky deepened. The desert made the particular sound of a place that has no name to call itself. Liam took a breath and backed toward the road, eyes on the swing set. The seat moved again, then a little harder, as if whoever sat there had let their legs go. He could almost hear the small, sticky hands on the chain links, the start of a hummed tune with no words. "Okay," he said, "hands up now." An absurd surrender. "Okay, I'm leaving." His car did not start. The key turned, the dash lights flickered, and the engine coughed twice like a smoker who has misplaced his lungs. Nothing. He tried again, and again the car made a noise of polite refusal, as if pretending not to understand. Liam stared through the windshield at the playground, at the sign, at the swing now moving with long, confident strokes. He reached for his phone, though he knew better. The dead black mirror of it caught the brief wash of starlight and gave it back to him like a small, steady eye. He could walk. The map said 30 miles to the next anything, and the road was long and straight, but the night had thickened. The desert has a way of rearranging distance when light goes. He pictured himself a shrinking dot under an indifferent sky. He pictured coyotes and the particular kind of silence that makes you hear your own heart and doubt it. He pictured the swing still moving after he had become a noise too small to measure. So he did the thing he didn't want. He went back. At the edge of the playground, he stopped and spoke aloud, to the air, or to whatever wore it. "I need help," he said. It sounded foolish and earnest, which was honest. "If someone's here, can you stop? Can you just stop?" For a long moment, nothing changed. Then the swing slowed. The seesaw went still. The merry-go-round gave one last sigh and halted with a lazy wobble. Silence returned with its careful feet. Liam felt the pressure in his chest ease like a hand lifting away. "Thank you," he said, and the words surprised him. He meant them. He was about to turn when he saw the slide's ladder. A shape stood at the top. No, not stood. Balanced, as if poised in a game. The flashlight found it and flickered as if embarrassed. The shape was the size of a child, but too thin, all elbows and ankles cut from shadow. It leaned forward and tilted its head, and the gesture was so exactly something a child would do that Liam's throat closed. He raised a hand and waved, small and slow. The shape did not wave back. It put one foot on the lip of the slide and settled onto it with the pleased solemnity of a ritual. Then let go. It slid. As it moved, it gathered weight, not in ounces, but in attention. The air pressed inward, the night concaved. The shape left no dent, no drag, but the sand at the bottom rippled outward as if receiving a body. The shape reached the end and didn't rise. It lay there a second, invisible and perfectly present, then lifted to a sit. Liam saw nothing and knew exactly where it was. The way you know which pocket your keys are in without patting yourself. The shape turned its empty head toward him and waited. "Do you want me to?" He swallowed. "Push." He moved to the swing set instead because it felt safer, because he could pretend, because a part of him was already the child again and couldn't but resist the logic of the place. He lifted the empty swing seat, set his hand to the chain, and gave it a careful shove. It went out, returned, out again, finding a rhythm that accepted him. The other swing moved a little as if someone had bumped it with a knee, then matched the first. The pair moved in tandem, two heartbeats caught in a machine that never had one. Liam's eyes stung. He blinked hard. The night pressed closer, but it had lost its cruelty. He talked, and as he talked, he realized he was telling a story into the dark, about missing a turn, about a job that made him feel like a coat on someone else's chair, about the way he had begun to wake each morning with a taste like copper. He didn't expect answers. He didn't get them, but something listened in a way people rarely do. When he finished, the swing slowed. The empty seat at his side drifted, paused, then bumped gently into his hip, like a child's head in a tired moment. He laughed through a surprise of tears. "You're not lost, are you?" he said, and it came out not as a question, but as an admission. His car started on the first try. He didn't question it. He didn't look for a reason. He stood for a while longer and watched the swings until they stopped. The shape at the slide climbed the ladder again, patient as gravity. A softer laugh moved through the air, no sharper than the wing of a moth. He lifted a hand in farewell, then walked to the road. The engine purred. The headlights cut a clean tunnel through the dark. He pulled onto the highway, and the playground slid out of view, swallowed behind him by sand and distance. He did not check the mirror. 30 miles later, he saw the glow of a town. Motels sprouting from the edge of light like mushrooms after rain. He took the first he found, a low building with a neon sign that hummed like a beehive. The clerk handed him a key attached to a wooden fob shaped like a lopsided star. "Drive okay out there?" she asked, like she asked everyone. "Yeah," he said, "except for the playground." She looked up. "Playground?" "In the desert," he said, then realized how it sounded. He shrugged. "Never mind." But the clerk-ass face had shifted in a way people-ass faces do. When someone says the password to a room you didn't know you were entering. "Huh," she said. "Haven't heard about that in a while." He waited. "Used to be a town out there," she said at last. "Copper boom. Folks built a playground for the miners' kids because a school was taking too long. Then the ore dried up. A fever took the rest. You know how these stories go."